welcome to a new video on the channel. Something I've not done for a little while is give you an update on the Lotus Elan M100. But you'll notice today I'm actually in a 911 Carrera 4 GTS, which has been very kindly lent to me by Porsche GB. There's a review video of that. You can find that by clicking the link above here. But while I'm out and about in the 911, I thought it was a good opportunity, because I've got the camera set up and everything ready to go, to spend some time talking about owning the Lotus Elan M100. So there are some things to report. It's been amazingly reliable. It is really interesting how most people say with a Lotus, lots of trouble, usually serious. But it's been a great car. It's been so reliable. I really can't sing its praises highly enough in terms of something that I can keep on the trickle charger, but just get it out of the garage and it's ready to go. I've done quite a lot with it in the last couple of years. I've been to the Goodwood Festival of Speed. It got me all the way down to the south coast with no problems. I've also been to a Goodwood Media Day as well, so another long trip where the Lotus got to meet the newer Mira, which was really interesting. It's been to the Bicester Heritage Meet a few times as well. Tended to be the only M100 there. So yeah, quite a lot of fairly long trips. No Alpine passes or no North Coast 500 yet, but it's behaved faultlessly. The only kind of problem I had was no air conditioning in the middle of the summer, driving down to Goodwood and the sun being right in the side of my head for the entire time that I was there with no air conditioning. So, but you can't blame the car for that. It's a 90s car. There weren't many of them that had air conditioning. So what's happened then with the car? It's had all new tyres fairly recently. I was determined to make sure that I got Michelin Pilot Sports for it, because from the handbook I noticed that that's kind of what it came with. So I wanted to have those tyres, and one of the tyres that was on it had no date code, so maybe it wasn't a 1995 tyre, but it was certainly pretty close. So, and a friend of mine who's got a TVR Chimera said, oh, you really will notice a difference when you put some new tyres on it. And I did. The ride quality got a lot better, particularly over really bad bumps. If you've got tyres that are kind of over 5 years old, I would recommend getting some fairly new tyres for your classic car, because it's certainly worth it. Something else that you probably remember from the 2-year review video was that the windscreen had a long crack in it, and also it was delaminating. So as you can see here, finally the crack got so big that it wasn't going to pass the MOT, so I had a new windscreen put in. That was interesting because there was a few problems with that, working out what colour tint the windscreen should have, because they kind of had a bronzy tint and a green tint, and also there was a completely clear windscreen as well. And with a bit of investigation I found out that the Elans in this country certainly had the green tinted window, which works well because my car's green. I don't think any of them had the kind of bronzy coloured tint. But interestingly, I think Australia cars had a completely clear window. I don't know whether it was for a regulation at the time, because obviously Lotus wouldn't make their own windscreen. As most of you probably already know, it's used on the Noble sports car, even though the kind of black painting that is a slightly different shape. So I think I might have ended up with a Noble windscreen, which is no hardship. Big problem I did have though is that the rear view mirror is glued to the windscreen, as I'm sure some of you know. And the problem with that was it's a really small contact patch, and the company that came to fit the windscreen, they couldn't make it stay on all of the time, so I had to use like a rubber sucker one temporarily. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a bracket that goes into the headliner so that it's bolted in there, so it can hang off that, so it doesn't actually have to be glued to the windscreen. This video is sponsored by Dagostini Collectibles. Dagostini has over half a century's expertise in creating the world's most remarkable scale model kits. Dagostini work with premium brands like Lamborghini, Harley-Davidson and Volkswagen to bring you officially licensed products that have been enjoyed by over 100,000 customers worldwide. Dagostini's latest model is one that's close to my heart, as it's a Lotus. It's an exclusive build-up model of the legendary Lotus Renault 97T Formula 1 car, as raced by the great Ayrton Senna. So with your subscription, every month you'll receive magazines with the parts to build your model, and these all have the details of how to assemble the model, which is quite straightforward, and also interesting facts about the history of the Lotus Renault 97T, Formula 1 Grand Prix and Ayrton Senna's amazing career. The fully accurate model is 1/8 scale, which is a nice large scale and has lots of great detailed finishes that really bring it to life,
like rubber Goodyear tyres, a highly detailed reproduction of the Renault EF4B engine, high quality metal components, and original sponsorship decals. It's really easy to assemble because the step-by-step instructions in the magazine are really straightforward and easy to follow. I'm really enjoying building mine, as you can see. There's a unique link in the description below to take you to the Dagostini website, where you'll find more details about this great model. Now, back to the video.
A fairly big problem that I had, that you might have remembered from the 2-year review, was that the exhaust was a bit rattly, and I think it was because the catalytic converter, the internal baffles or whatever they call, or the unit inside, had shrank, which happens when they get older, and that was kind of rattling around inside the main casing. So I took it for an MOT, and the guy at the MOT centre said that he thought it was going to fail, so is it even worth testing it, because I can hear that the catalytic converter is past its best. But I said, oh, go on, can you test it anyway? And it's still passed, which is great considering it's like, what, a 25-year-old slightly broken catalytic converter. But the time had come, I think, because it was quite noisy, so I bought a new catalytic converter, which amazingly wasn't very expensive. I think it was only about 100 quid or 130 quid, and as you can see here, we fitted that on the drive. Part of the problem of that was I needed extra long ramps because the car's so low at the front, so I wouldn't recommend fitting it on your own drive like we did. Probably take it and get it done by a specialist with a proper 4-post lift, because it's very hard to get underneath. But fitted that and it sounds great now. I don't like it's got a sports exhaust on it. The back box is still quite noisy, so I might change that for a more OEM regular back box. But yeah, so that fixed the rattly exhaust catalytic converter problem. Something else that went wrong in the last year or so was that the driver's side window stopped working, the electric window. So that was interesting. We had to take off the door panel, which means you have to start by taking off the lock mechanism out of here. And a lot of people have said that the little orange tab inside it, there's no way that you're ever going to get that off without breaking it, because it's got very small clips on the inside, as you can see. So we thought, challenge accepted, we'll try and get that out without breaking it, and we did, by being very gentle and just using some tweezers and bits and bobs that we had lying around. We managed to get that out without actually breaking it, which was a bit of a win. Once into the door panel, you can see there's some slightly naff Lotusness about how you have to pull off the glued carpet to get to the screws. Looks like somebody had been in there before, which I didn't know about because I think there was a problem with the locking mechanism. But you know, different screws, all the heads of the screws were chewed up, so we had to kind of use a Dremel to put a line into them so that we could get them off. But once the panel came off, we got in. It was quite difficult to get into the door. There was some broken glass in there, so I think they had been a problem before at some point. What we found was that the cable had snapped, or the cable had frayed because it had been kind of unravelled during the course of its use, and just from age and wear, really. But one of the problems was the Bowden cable went through the motor and then had the kind of spigots either end that are fused to the ends, just like a bicycle cable. But of course you have to have a machine to do that, and you have to pass it through the motor and then do it, which causes a few problems because you couldn't send the cable off for it to be done, because then it wouldn't go into the motor. So you have to send the motor off as well, and then of course it's got to be done by a specialist, and it's quite expensive. So we kind of found a new cable, obviously cut one of the spigots off the end of it so we could get it through the motor, and then find a way to fuse the new spigot or end point onto it now that it's through the motor. So it was a bit of a faff, but in the end we managed to get it to work and put it back together, and that's turned out reasonably well. We've had the usual problems with the parking brake not being up to force when it comes for the MOT. I know a lot of M100 owners have that problem, that the parking brake is never quite up to it, so that had to have a little bit of adjustment again, but we managed to get that working and pass the MOT. There was an advisory, not this year but the year before, that the front brakes were binding a little bit, so we took those apart, and it needed some new pads. We'd already bought some new pads because they are Astra pads from the 90s period, so we put those on, and that solved the problems with the brakes binding. I still haven't got round to refurbishing the wheels, but that's probably the next thing that I'll do this year. It could probably do with the timing belt chain as well, and maybe a new water pump, just as a kind of a regular service interval element. It's a good thing to do, so probably sooner rather than later would be a good idea. The points on the hood just behind the side window are still a little bit of a bane of my life, to be honest, because the frame does tend to rub there, as I know a lot of owners will know. So I've got to find some way of putting some extra material on the inside, maybe or bonding something in there just to make sure that the frame doesn't gradually work its way through the hood at that point, because otherwise I'm going to be in for a new hood then, which isn't going to be cheap. And it would be a shame to lose the original hood. The stereos stopped working as well, which may or may not be down to the fact that I might have put the battery charger on the wrong way round at one point, just briefly. So I think I might have blown a fuse on the stereo, so I need to fix that. So I think things to be done for this year, probably if you look back at the 2-year review, probably a few things still on the list. I want to refurbish the wheels. I'd like to fix the sort of decayed rubbers around the windows and around the front leading edge of the windows, certainly, just to make that look a little bit smarter. And I think, as I've said, the water pump, the timing belt probably are due for a change as well. And I think because I've done about sort of probably 4,000 miles since I bought the car, it's probably time for an oil change. Even though the oil still looks really clear and it's not been worked that hard, I think it's probably good. I'm sure in the owner's manual it sort of recommends every 3,000 miles or so is when you should change the oil on the Isuzu engine. It does live in the garage, so it leads quite a charmed life, so it does stay out of the weather most of the time. It has had to be pressed into service a couple of times in the winter, but I do try to keep the salt off those wishbones. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the people who asked for an update on the Elan and those who noticed it in the background on some of the Porsche videos as well. It's still very much my classic car. I do love it. I can't imagine ever getting rid of it unless I have to, so it's still going to be around for a while. So I really should do a few more reviews and a few more bits of information about it. But let me know in the comments if you are interested in the Elan, because I was kind of always told Lotus is the worst brand to build a YouTube channel on because nobody watches Lotus videos. But let me know what you think about that as well. A bit of a bugbear of mine when it comes to the M100 is, I don't know if anybody has watched the sort of latest launches of product from Lotus, whether it be the Emira or whether it be the Electra and things like that. Certainly with the Emira, they did quite a big fanfare at Television Centre where they sort of talked about the history of Lotus, and when you're an M100 owner, you kind of notice that they go, and the Esprit was in a fantastic car, and then next it's the Elise, and they completely miss out and ignore the M100, which I think is a bit of a shame, because there's this kind of overhanging idea that everybody hates the M100 because it was front wheel drive. But whenever I stop anywhere in the M100, people love it, people are interested in it. There's no talk of, oh, this is a load of rubbish because it was a front wheel drive 2-seater sports car. What's the point in that? People don't even know that it's front wheel drive, or they just think that it's a really interesting car, which it is. I did chat with Peter Stevens about it, name dropping there, at a Goodwood Revival. I bumped into Peter Stevens and thanked him for the M100, because I think he probably expects people just to go up to him and say, thanks for the McLaren F1, which I'm sure they do. But I think I took him by surprise that I said, thanks for the M100. But he said, he's got a soft spot for the car. He's got fond memories of the design process. So, it is a thing that is or should be appreciated. I did have a message from a company that was selling an M100 to Lotus, a really low mileage concourse example. So they do have one in their collection, and that car company said that Lotus were really proud of it and they love it and they're really fond of it. But it doesn't tend to come across to M100 owners. Maybe it's just me, but yeah, I don't think it should be the leper of Lotus heritage. I think it was an incredible car. It was really brave of them to do front wheel drive. I know they probably did that for the reasons that there were costs and GM were insistent on using particular parts and that kind of thing. But the M100 really had, it was a finished, quite polished, quality product like a regular car. So I think that's something that they should be really proud of. But that's about it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you get the chance, and hit the notification bell. Lots of car content on the channel. There's Porsche reviews, there's classic car reviews, even things like the Renault Aventime and and stuff like that. So I'm sure you'll find, if you're a bit of a petrol head like me, you'll find something that you like. But anyway, thanks again, and bye for now.